Welcome back to World History, where the past isn't just remembered, it roars back to life. Today, we dive into the heart of one of the bloodiest and most legendary clashes ever fought on American soil. The Battle of Gettysburg, you may know the name, but you've never seen it like this. Imagine it July 1863. The air is thick with smoke. The thunder of cannon fire shakes the earth, and charging soldiers scream across burning fields. From a distance, the battlefield of Gettysburg looked like the end of the world. Union and Confederate forces collided in a storm of violence so fierce that barns and houses burst into flames, and cannonballs turned green pastures into fiery hell. And in the chaos, destiny stood watching. As the battle raged, President Abraham Lincoln would later deliver words that reshaped the soul of a nation. The Gettysburg Address, just 271 words long, delivered under the gray sky, with faces of every age locked on him, carried more weight than entire volumes of history. In that moment, Lincoln wasn't just speaking to the living, he was whispering to the ghosts rising from the soil beneath his feet. Zoom in on the raw human element of war. A Confederate and Union soldier, dust-covered, blood-stained, and barely older than boys, stand eye to eye, each seeing the enemy, the fear, and perhaps even their own reflection. Across the battlefield at dawn, as golden light strikes broken regiments, the truth becomes painfully clear. No one here is a villain. They're all trapped in a war larger than themselves. Among the fallen was a teenage drummer boy, his small hands, once beating time for bravery, now gripping a blood-stained drum. His eyes tell a story of innocence shattered, echoing the tragedy of a generation caught between orders and mortality. And then Pickett's charge, the final, desperate gamble. Confederate soldiers charged across open ground as Union artillery tore the earth apart. Flags waved, bodies fell, and history froze in a moment of suicidal bravery and devastating loss. It was a scene no painting could capture, but one we now recreate in impossible detail, away from the front lines. The horrors continued. Field hospitals overflowed. Limbs piled outside blood-soaked tents. Surgeons worked with saws, not scalpels. Their uniforms drenched in red. It was medicine without mercy. Life or death was decided in minutes, and not all the fighting was done with guns. Hidden in plain sight, a Confederate spy moved silently through a Gettysburg tavern, a map sewn into his coat, his eyes scanning the crowd. One wrong look, and his mission and life would end. Then came the storm. Thunder clapped as if heaven itself disapproved. Lightning lit up the silhouettes of broken soldiers, charred trees, and shattered dreams, and even now some say the ghost of a Union soldier still wanders the cemetery, lost in the fog, searching for peace in a war that never left him. This was Gettysburg, not just a battle, but a living nightmare that shaped a nation. And we're just getting started. The secrets of Gettysburg weren't only written in blood, they were hidden in the shadows, buried in the dirt, and burned into memory. As the cannons fell silent and smoke settled across the Pennsylvania fields, the stories that would never make the history books began to whisper through time. In the tall grass near Cemetery Ridge, an officer's journal lay, open pages soaked in blood, the ink running with final thoughts and torn orders that were never followed. The feather pen beside it stood still, frozen in time, like the man who once held it. It was more than a diary. It was a farewell to a world he would never see again. Meanwhile, amid the chaos, a lone war photographer braved the thunder of artillery and the screams of the dying. His massive wooden tripod camera stood like a monument of defiance. With every click of the shutter, he captured not just images, but the agony of a nation tearing itself apart. Behind him, soldiers ran, cried, bled, and died, but he stood firm, immortalizing the cost of war on glass plates and fragile film. In one tent, a bullet had torn through a soldier's chest, yet lodged miraculously in the spine of a leather-bound Bible he carried in his uniform. That sacred book, singed and split, saved a life. The man lived, but his faith was forever transformed. It wasn't just the men in uniform who carried the weight of this war. Women, wrapped in torn shawls and soot-covered aprons, dug shallow graves with bare hands and trembling hearts. They wept as they covered strangers with dirt, whispered prayers to the wind, and returned to the wounded with torn linen and trembling fingers. They were the silent backbone of Gettysburg, their pain etched into every grave they dug. From above, a hot air balloon floated like an eye in the sky. Union officers used it to scan the battlefield, mapping Confederate movements as cannon fire echoed beneath them. The view was breathtaking and horrifying. What they saw wasn't just strategy, it was slaughter in slow motion, but some say that, long after the final shots were fired, the spirits of Gettysburg refused to leave. Tourists today walk among gravestones, unaware of the cold breeze that suddenly cuts through summer air. Some swear they've seen ghostly figures, Civil War soldiers marching silently through the fog. Whether truth or legend, Gettysburg is alive in ways the living may never understand. Back in the thick of the fight, a Union general stood tall atop a hill, sword raised high, leading a desperate cavalry charge as chaos erupted all around. Time slowed in that moment, steel clashed, hooves pounded, and honor hung in the balance. Farther off, flames swallowed a farmhouse. Confederate soldiers, desperate and starving, looted whatever supplies they could. The night was painted with smoke and greed. War didn't just destroy armies, it devoured innocence, and from the shadows of a distant church bell tower, a Confederate sniper took aim. He watched, waited, and fired, every shot calculated, every breath cold. His bullet could change the course of the battle, or end a man's story in silence. At ground level, a shattered cannon wheel lay like a broken crown. Soldiers sprinted past it, feet pounding mud, screams piercing the air. In those final moments, victory meant nothing. Survival was the only anthem left. These were the forgotten stories behind the lines, and they are only beginning to surface. Under a gray, weeping sky, a soldier lay dying among the lifeless. In his hand, a worn photograph of his family, frozen in smiles he'd never see again. Around him, the bodies of friends and foes alike told the same story, that war, in the end, is less about glory and more about loss. The battlefield had become a graveyard with no names, only sorrow. Behind a low stone wall, two brothers met in secret, one dressed in Confederate gray, the other in Union blue. Their faces, etched with heartbreak, told of a bond torn by politics and pride. They embraced briefly, silently, knowing it could be the last time, and it was. That moment, hidden from history books, lived on only in memory and myth. In the modern age, we trace the past with technology. An ancient map of Gettysburg. Comey's alive, glowing with holographic lines that show where men marched, fell, and changed the course of history. Red and blue currents swirl across familiar hills, and with each movement, we realize how fragile and deliberate every inch of this war truly was. Today, reenactors dress in blue and gray, standing in the very places where real blood once soaked the ground. But in this strange overlap of past and present, the past sometimes bleeds through. Some say they've seen it, the faint outline of a fallen soldier, a transparent echo of the man who once stood there. History doesn't sleep here, it walks beside us. On moonlit nights, they speak of a figure walking Gettysburg's empty roads, lantern in hand, tall, somber, and unmistakably him, the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. Whether vision or myth, it's fitting. The man who gave Gettysburg its voice seems unable to leave its silence behind. But Gettysburg was not just tragedy. It was trauma. A wagon piled high with severed limbs pulled away from a field hospital, the wheels creaking under the weight of suffering. It was a grotesque but necessary part of a brutal conflict. For those who survived, the war would never truly end. In a quiet corner of a smoky tent, a young soldier penned his final letter, the ink blurred with tears. He didn't know if the letter would reach home, he only knew he needed to say goodbye. That letter may be lost, but his words still echo in the wind. Today, the fields are quiet. Flowers grow where cannonballs once tore through soil. But if you look closely, in just the right light, the shadows of marching men still cross the ridges. They don't speak, they don't have to. Cannon fires in slow motion. The barrel erupts in smoke and flame, a memory relived over and over. Time bends. Union and Confederate flags fly once more, meeting mid-air in a dance of defiance and sacrifice. Because Gettysburg never really ended. It endures in ghostly footfalls, in fading letters, and in the hearts of those who dare to remember.